Putin aims to destroy Ukraine and has zero interest in a compromised peace. Now, part of that is accurate. As we've said all along, Putin's not going to compromise on what they consider their core requirements, the root causes, the things that they have to have, their minimum objectives, which to us are maximalist from our perspective. But then you get into why he says it, and there's where we have a difference of opinion, and where this continues, this kind of reasoning undermines our ability to reach a negotiated settlement or an end to the war that's going to be beneficial to the Western side. In this article, they say that, quote, to Putin, the emergence of an independent Ukraine is a symbol of Russia's post-Soviet humiliation and a potential catalyst for the next stage of his country's retreat from empire. According to this twisted imperial logic, if a province as quintessentially Russian as Ukraine is allowed to break away and establish itself as a modern European democracy, the entire Russian Federation will be in danger of disintegrating. That is so irrational and logic and evidence-free as I can hardly imagine it. If that was the case, Ukraine had been independent since 1991. Now, up to 2024, so, all of those years, I mean, what is it, 30-something, 34 years, whatever the number is. That's a long time. Russia had never made any move before that. Did the Russian Federation crumble and fall apart? It wasn't even on their radar. And to suggest it is the only way you can believe that is if you don't know anything at all about European history. You don't know anything that's happened in the world since 1991. And yet this passes, the Atlantic Council passes for elite thinking in the West. This is harming us, folks, because most people don't have the time to do what we do and dig into this stuff for hours every single day. They count on figures like this, and the Atlantic Council in the past has done excellent work. This is not excellent work. This is more of the same of disinformation, not even misinformation. This is an intentional intent to make you believe a set of facts that aren't true. And the reason is because if you see Putin in these maniacal views that he's just, eyes all twisted, he's like Hitler. He just wants to go and take Czechoslovakia, the Sudetenland, then Poland, and then France, etc. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to make you think this is Hitler Part 2. And that, my God, we have to stop him now or Paris will fall at some point in the future. That's where this is going. And that's why it's harmful, because the contrary is true. I'm going to show you that in just a second. But here, one more from the Kiev Post itself, from the Ukraine side. It's not limited to the West, and this is probably not that much of a surprise. But the headline there is Trump. Putin doesn't want peace because he's winning. But is he? Is he winning? And inside the article there, it says, quote, citing data from a deep state analysis, it says that despite the numerical advantage Russian forces enjoy, they remain a long way from achieving Putin's stated aims. Since January, despite a claimed upsurge in its offensive, Russian forces have taken the equivalent of only around 0.15% of Ukraine's territory. The data show this pace of advance is less than a third of that achieved at the end of 2024, falling from about 125 square kilometers to 41 square kilometers a week. So you want to show as good news that you only lost 41 square kilometers per week. Now, a couple of things. First of all, that assumes that that's all Russia can do, that's all Russia did. And I'm sure that those numbers are probably right. That matches with other things that I've seen. So probably there is a reduction in the pace of Russian acquisition from the end of 2024, which was at a very highly accelerated rate. Probably it would have been better to say, more accurate to say, what was that compared to year over year, the previous same period of time from 2024 in the first part, not just the last, because we already know that was in an upsurge. I would wager they're probably closer to equivalent, because this one turned out to be a big surge. That's the first point here. Second point, maybe the bigger point, they're still advancing. They're still capturing territory. And I showed you Julian Rivka's video from a couple of days ago that in the previous 6 weeks, there is substantial loss in the most important areas in the Pokrovsk area, where Russia had run into some challenges in one particular. They were trying to surround Pokrovsk from the south. That kind of has petered out, and it truly has. So Russia says, all right, we're going to try from the north here. That's not petered out. As a matter of fact, now they're making more advances in the northern part of that, and still with the net that they're going to come to a position where they can get it into an operational encirclement. So they have accomplished quite a bit in the last 6 weeks. But your side, even at that, even if that was the only point you wanted to make, you still have to say, hang on. Okay, it's slowed. It hasn't stopped. And what do you have on the Ukraine side, on the Western side, that can stop it and then reverse it? Because if you can't show a path, a viable path to where we can continue forward and stop this first and then start to reverse it, then you just have a slower death than a faster death. But you still have a death. That's the reality here that just cannot be acknowledged by either the Ukrainians themselves at the official level or anybody in the West, it seems, or very many at any rate. And that is the just the anguishing part of this, because you have all of these Ukrainian people that are not subject to the spin. They're not subject to what you claim and the positive, the lipstick you want to put on this pig. They're not subject to that. They die because of it every day. This is what angers me. I have to be honest with you. We claim that we care about the Ukrainian people. We claim to care about democracy and freedom and holding back the tyranny and all this stuff. And yet, even with these things that I'm showing here from the West side that we're seeing, they're partially acknowledging the truth and then trying to spin a different interpretation of it. But the spin never stops reality. And the men on the ground in Ukraine pay a fatal, permanent price every freaking day for it. So you claim to want to help Ukraine. You claim to want to stand up for Ukraine, people who are making these arguments. And all you do is ensure more of them pay the final price. They'll never get to live to see another day. There'll probably be multiple hundreds, maybe 1,000 Ukraine people will die today. And then those who survive today, another group of those people are going to die the following day, and so on until eventually collapse. It almost can't be any other way, because you can't map out any kind of rational possibility of fully stopping and then reversing. And in the absence of that, the only thing that you're doing is just applauding and patting yourselves on the back for keeping the Western public misinformed, while everything that you stand for disintegrates around your feet. And listen, you can also count another category there, is that the $61 billion package passed by the Biden administration, the last big one that the United States did in May of 2024, is just a trickle now. Almost all of that has been given away. The Biden administration themselves tried to really rush it out the door before they left office, and what's been left is continuing on, but it's just a snail's pace. It's just a trickle, and at some point, even that trickle is going to run out. Europe is already doing all it can. They keep tossing in these little packages here and there, but it's minuscule compared to what's needed just to maintain the slow pace of loss. And there will come a point here in a few months to where you won't even be able to do that. And the losses will accelerate, not because of absence of courage or willingness of the Ukraine side to fight, but because they just don't have the ammunition. And we've been showing you here recently, there is growing evidence that the foundation is cracking among the ability of the Ukrainian armed forces to continue to fight, with the high-profile resignation of the 147th Mechanized Brigade commander, the firing of the 59th Brigade commander, and I'm, according to many Telegram channels on the Ukraine side, that's the tip of the iceberg, and there is even more dissatisfaction at the ground. You continue to have the issue with large numbers and percentages of their troops leaving the fight, abandoning the fight. They're still running away. They're desperate to not get grabbed off the street, etc. All the things that show you that the foundation and the fabric of the Ukraine armed forces is cracking now. And it's anybody's guess how much longer it'll be before there's finally going to be some a major break. Now, I mentioned to you a second ago that we're mischaracterizing what the Russians say, but if you listen to what the Russians say, you'll get a pretty good idea what they are. I'm going to show you here Sergei Lavrov from a video that was posted earlier today. He said that, listen, we've been looking for European-wide security for the long time, as opposed to what that Atlantic Council says, which is Russia just has this, wild-eyed look that it wants to capture territory and just take over everything and recreate the Russian Empire, is the phrase that they use. They're saying, listen, we have always and only said we just want a European security architecture where everybody can live in peace.
It stated that no country, no organization in the OSCE region has the right to claim dominance within the organization. This principle was reaffirmed word for word in 2010 at the OSCE summit in Astana. After that, we insisted that our Western partners adhere to this principle, given that they, without the slightest hesitation, despite all these high-level commitments they had signed, continued NATO's eastward expansion, contrary to our repeated warnings that this posed direct threats to Russia's security and violated the principle of indivisible security.
That's been the consistent statement by the Russian side for years and years. They've been saying that. The OSCE, which we are all in the West were signatories to include the Russians, it had a provision that said nobody's security can be ensured at the expense of another member's security. Russia cited that forever. And we had, David Fields on, a former defense attaché in Moscow for Britain. And he said, listen, we used to have good relations up until 2013. We actually had military to military relations. We had good discussions back. So there was at least, the presence of discussions, and all that ended after what happened in the Maidan in 2014 and Crimea and all that stuff that happened. And then the civil war that erupted, et cetera, those were broken. And so at that point, then we don't really care about the documents that were signed there. Now then, we want security for Ukraine at the expense of Russia and the NATO coming in, et cetera. All that is well known. We knew that before, and Russia had been telling us. I wrote an article before this war started, and I said, listen, this stuff has been going on for a long time. And after it, I pointed out, it was a 15-year period where Russia had been warning, going back to the Munich Security Conference. I think it was in 2007, where Vladimir Putin came out and said, if you continue to expand NATO into Ukraine, it is a national security imperative, and we will respond to it. We consider that an existential crisis. So he said it then. And then again in 2008, when the NATO ignored what he said the very next year and declared that Ukraine would be a member of NATO, et cetera, they continued to warn. They warned all the way up to December 2021, where they said, if you keep and persist on this, we will use military technical means to resolve the situation. You had then Jens Stoltenberg defiantly and in your face say, nobody will tell us who can and cannot come into NATO. We will decide, and at some point, Ukraine will come in. At which point, then Russia said, okay, I got it. That's your position. Here's mine. So that's where we are right now.